Hey guys, Elizabeth here from Plant-Based Bride, and today I'm reviewing Carnage, Swallowing the Past. Carnage, Swallowing the Past is a comedic mockumentary by director Simon Amstell, focusing on what the world would look like in 50 years if everyone went vegan. The film premiered on BBC iPlayer on March 19th, 2017, and focuses on the UK, where the older generation is suffering the guilt of their omnivorous past. Director Simon Amstell is a Jewish-British comedian and a vegan, and this is his first time directing a feature-length film. First of all, this film is funny. My husband and I laughed quite a bit throughout the entire movie, whether it was meat eaters or vegans who were being poked fun at. This was the first time I'd ever seen a fictional film that was focused on veganism, and I have to say I loved it and hope that this will become its own genre. I would love to see more vegan representation in film and television. As an actor, I firmly believe that stories can change the world. And I think Simon Amstell has told a pretty compelling story with this film. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the story or haven't seen the movie, I'm going to give you a general plot synopsis. This one is from the BBC's website. Set in a utopian 2067, Carnage looks back at a time when human beings ate other animals. For the young people of this time, the idea that their grandparents could have been complicit in a bloodbath of unnecessary suffering is wholly unimaginable. The film aims to break the taboo around Britain's animal-eating past, whilst showing compassion for a generation now seeking therapy to cope with the horror of their unthinkable actions. Carnage combines archive with original drama and is narrated by Simon Amstell, who gives a unique comedic peek into a future where animals live equally amongst humans. The film opens with a ridiculously happy group of vegan teenagers ascending a hill and proceeding to feed each other plant foods while laughing, and Simon Amstell begins his excellent narration. The film has two main focuses, the first one being the struggle of the older generation to accept their past and to forgive themselves for eating animals, dealing with their guilt. And the second part is the history of the vegan movement from 1944 all the way through 2067 and how the movement changed and morphed over the years. So because I don't want to spoil this for anyone who wants to watch it who hasn't already, I just want to mention some of my favorite parts and quotes from the film. We're introduced pretty early on to these weekly therapy sessions that happen with the older generation, where they're struggling with the guilt of their past and trying to work through all of those feelings associated with eating animals. And the woman who runs these therapy sessions says, "It's still difficult to say aloud. I ate fish. I drank the milk from cows." And this is something that I think ethical vegans will recognize and really relate to. All of these scenes with the older generation trying to forgive themselves is really funny. They're so over the top, but they also hit home for something that most ethical vegans, if not all ethical vegans, have felt at some point, and that is guilt about having eaten animals. I feel deep guilt around the fact that I ate animals and animal products for 19 years of my life. That's 19 years of being complicit in the murder and torture of so many animals, and I can never take that back. I feel guilty about that, and it makes me sad every time I think about it. While I don't think that what I need is weekly group therapy where I mention different types of cheeses that I used to eat, I do need to remind myself to show myself kindness and compassion and to forgive myself for the way I lived my life before I knew what I know now. When a tearful older woman repeats, "I forgive you and I love you" to herself, it hit me right here. Another thing I loved about this film was how seamlessly they combined archival footage with fictional clips, to the point where I still don't even know what of that historical footage is real and what isn't. Throughout those clips, there's some hilarious commentary about both vegans and meat eaters from the 1940s all the way into the future. And one of my favorite quotes from this section was, "In time, vegans would come to be seen as trailblazing heroes, but for now they were sat in a semicircle around a table of brown food and fruit." I also enjoyed the poignant commentary on the rise of fast food, where the fast food industry came from, and also how the fast food industry has and continues to unabashedly advertise to children. One of my favorite quotes from that section was this one, and it is, "Ronald McDonald's hair was red because he was a clown. not because he couldn't stop swimming in blood. I also appreciated that they addressed how industrial farming has led to an uptick in diseases in both animals and the humans that eat them, and their commentary on the wave of animal-loving films in the 90s that made people love these animals in film, and how ironic it is to go see Babe and fall in love with that pig and then go to McDonald's for a Happy Meal, complete with Babe-themed toy. They also made a really interesting point about our view on animals that I think is very apt for 2017, that animals have to be useful. And our idea of useful is that they can be entertaining or they can be food, and that their value lies only in those two things. There was some really funny commentary on both real and fictional vegan activism and performance art, and also some interesting commentary on the fat shaming of television. The film goes on to poke fun at a couple specific celebrity chefs, and in that section some of my favorite quotes were, "Middle-class people felt concerned that they could be eating the same unhealthy, unethical food as poor people, and so were delighted when the white man, Gordon Ramsay, showed them how they could eat free-range animals." And then a little later, a woman on this TV show was saying, "Oh, I do think that happy meat tastes better," and everyone else was agreeing and say, "Yes, absolutely." And then Simon Amstell, the narrator, goes on to say, "Yet most people watching Gordon Ramsay didn't have the time or space to rear their own sheep, and so continued to eat sad sheep and die." Another one I enjoyed was this one. "From where we stand now, it seems obvious that to promote the preservation of fish, Hugh could have told people to stop eating fish. But instead, he wrote a book about how to cook fish." This is a phenomenon we see all of the time. People talk about trying to conserve or preserve animals or an ecosystem, and the way to do it is to continue to eat animal products. Somehow. Another great one from this section, Paul McCartney launched the more upbeat Meat-Free Monday, which of course does now sounds almost as offensive as Ethnic Cleansing Free Tuesday. One of my absolute favorites from the film, I have to say. That's a great quote. And even though that quote seems a little bit extreme at first glance or first hearing, I do think that it might help non-vegans understand how vegans feel a little bit better if you contextualize it that way. Setting aside one day as the day you're not going to slaughter animals and eat their flesh is pretty ridiculous. They mentioned how hot vegan celebrities started popping out of the woodwork and said, up until then, vegans could only make people uncomfortable, but now they could make them feel aroused. They also dissed PETA, with someone talking about their experience with PETA saying, "I just remember pretending to die a lot and being ignored," and points out the bizarre sexualization of yogurt commercials, saying, "The obscenity of forcing cows to lactate against their will and then making it sexy." There was so much more in there, so many more quotes I wrote down, so many more funny bits that I don't want to share because I don't want to ruin it for you guys. The last thing I want to duly note is the hilarious faux musical that they show clips of in the movie, and it's this woman in a spotlight in a cow costume just belting it out, and one of the most poignant lyrics that she sings that is funny in the film, but they also sort of drive it home, is "What kind of animal rapes just for milk?" So it may seem like I just loved this movie and there was nothing wrong with it because I just went on for who knows how many minutes talking about funny parts and parts I liked, but there were actually a couple things I disliked. The first thing is that there was quite a bit of footage of people eating animals and cooking shows where they're slicing up and crushing the bones of animals, and also video footage from within farms and slaughterhouses. And as a vegan watching that, it felt a little unnecessary, and it was quite emotional and difficult to watch. But I am, in a roundabout way, glad that they included that, because I do hope that some non-vegans watch this film, and I do think that it served a purpose within the film, and it's important for non-vegans watching it to kind of connect what's happening in the rest of the film to the reality of how we treat animals. The other thing is that rape was mentioned in the film a couple of times, and I did think that one place in particular, it was used a little callously and unnecessarily, and I can see the point of it. I can understand why they did it to a certain extent, but I wish that they hadn't. So with all of that, I want to give you guys my final thoughts on the film. I'm really intrigued by this film and the kinds of conversations I foresee it starting with vegans and non-vegans. I'm hoping that I get the opportunity to watch this film with non-vegans out of curiosity, not only for their reaction to the film, but if the film affects their views of animals or veganism in any way. This film is a far cry from your average dry vegan documentary. And don't get me wrong, I love dry documentaries. They're the reason I went vegetarian and then vegan. I love those films, but a lot of people aren't ever going to watch something like Forks Over Knives or Cowspiracy or Earthlings, and if they do, they still might not have a lasting impact. I know a number of people who watched Cowspiracy, for example, and that convinced them to go vegan, but I also know a number of people who watched the film and it didn't change their habits whatsoever. I think this satirical look at a vegan future that combines harsh criticism of our current system along with light jabs at either side maybe has more of a chance of converting those people. It just may be effective in changing the minds of a certain percentage of the population that your average vegan documentary doesn't reach. I want to reiterate that there are definitely some themes in this film that may be triggering to certain viewers. There is mention of rape and homicide, there's violence towards animals, and there's also some nudity. Even all of this aside, I just found this film incredibly enjoyable to watch. I was pulled into the narrative and I found their portrayal of a UK 50 years into the future pretty believable. I also laughed a lot. All in all, I think this film is a must-watch for everyone, vegan or not, and I give it 4.5 vegans out of 5 vegans. I have no idea where that rating system came from, but I think I'm gonna stick with it. Thanks so much for watching my review of Carnage. Please let me know in the comments below if you've seen this film and what your thoughts are. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. It's available on the BBC iPlayer. If I see it available anywhere else, I'll leave that in the description box for you. And also let me know if there's any other vegan films I should review on my channel. Give this video a like if you found this review interesting, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I put up new videos every Monday and Saturday. Watch my last video right here and follow me on social media. If you enjoy what I do and want it to continue, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Bye guys!